Comrades, welcome to the space where memories collide and shoutouts come in the beginning of the video. Praise appropriately first to Jess for being the first comment ever on this channel. Next, my newfound plutonium brethren. Huge high five to Sparkette, and certainly not least a hey you to the yum you. It is time for our intermediate introduction into Tai Chi, Qigong, and Kung Fu. Friends, it is with tremendous gratitude we open up this video here, beyond what I could articulate properly. After the last video, which was a blast, there is just so much feedback and comments, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that in an endeavor such as this. I'll continue to course correct to steer this in the direction that you guys want, so long as you communicate and let me know. And hey, that makes it all the more fun. And I do have a ton of really fun ideas to better engage, right? This video should be a little bit easier on the eyes and ears, hopefully. Let me know. I got microphone earbuds here. We're recording a little bit better. So, you know, in the immortal words of Gavin Rossdale, we're doing it. We're doing it together. But I'm not going into greedy fly. We're going into Qigong. So let's start at that. Alright guys, opening notes. What are we doing here? Why am I talking on opening notes? Well, it could be said that to some, the subject matter we're approaching gets a little complex. That said, you know, I do believe that a great strategy to approach things that are complex is simplicity. So it is in the spirit of simplicity that these opening notes have been contrived. Alright, so what I want to do here is go over anything in any preceding video, so it saves you guys the time of going back, sifting through, and trying to find those things and review them yourself. So we get you right, caught back up to where we are, and of course then zero in a little more acutely on what we're going over and why, give you a briefing on the mission. What does that equate to? I mean, I guess that, in my opinion, you gotta kind of pick and choose what you engage in and when, so as to be conducive to developing a good foundational or basic understanding of all of this. So naturally, we're going to be focusing on whatever is relevant to the present tense movement sequences or exercises that we're engaging in, It's a lot more important to me for you to really thoroughly understand a little bit instead of getting some standardized things that you just memorize or whatever it is, right? But it's not about you being good on Jeopardy. It's not about me convincing you that I know something. It's about helping you develop a personal relationship with the things that we're doing here in these concepts, so that you could understand them in an integral way in your own life. All right, through this, at least that's my hope. So without further ado, because that was a lot to talk on just on opening notes, right? So let's get moving to get into it, okay? And get right into the review of what we went over last time. All right, review of the preceding information. What is relevant as we go into this here in this video? Well, first of all, definitely the breathing, right? Do we remember the breathing from last video? It was referred to as therein breathing. And the reason for that is because we are breathing into the lower lung, about 3 fingers distance beneath the navel. That region is referred to as the therein, which we will discuss way more, because that is an integral part of the energy matrix model that we're trying to better discern and understand. So yeah, the breathing, without further ado. In through the nose to the lower lung, you're expanding that lower belly, the therein region first, and then as you continue to inhale, that air fills up, the lungs are completely filled. So then, as the lungs are now completely filled and we begin our exhale, we're focusing on trying to time it respectively so that our inhale and our exhale are the same length, okay? The same amount of time it takes you to fill your lungs is the same amount of time it takes you to exhale, all timed respectively with the body, so on and so forth, okay? Now, when you're exhaling, I want you to remember one thing that I didn't mention here yet, which is having your tongue lightly touching the roof of your mouth right behind your teeth. If you want to think of it in a familiar way, what you're doing there is actually creating a circuit or something pretty similar. I believe that comprehension is at least tangentially accurate. So again, lots of stuff we'll get into, and lots of cool stuff we'll get into. The moving around of energy and the nature of it, how we experience that, is surely the topics we want to get to, right? Let's move on so we get there. Now, just real quick, I want to mention there's a lot of different ways to breathe to achieve a number of different things. Some forms of breathing are more conducive to one goal, while different forms of breathing are more conducive to another. And we will get into all of those, but for right now, I want you to continue with the Dantian breathing for the rest of the Jiuguan series. Okay. How about words? We went over some words in the last video, and of course, certain words are really important so that we, we could convey accurately what we're interested in, what we're talking about, what we're learning. You don't want to sound foolish when talking about what you're learning amongst others in the know, right? So, unfortunately, in the martial arts world, you're going to find that a lot of words are used wildly different by a lot of different and very confident people, okay? I don't want that to trip anyone up, okay? Don't get so hung up on my definition. Don't get so hung up on somebody else's definition. Expand these definitions so that they're your own personal articulation. So with that said, let's talk about those words. First up, we had Kung Fu, the umbrella, right? That is the umbrella term for internal and external training. Now, Kung Fu, we return to that umbrella, that actually means proficiency. So if we have a great golfer out there, crushing it, holes in one, you could look at that and say, that's great Kung Fu. That's good Kung Fu. That's a little bit of a different take on it because, right, if you think about it like that, you start to say to yourself, well, wait a second, there really isn't a martial art called Kung Fu. There's martial arts that are referred to as people's Kung Fu or their proficiency. That's a little bit more of an accurate way to look at that. Okay, so we are obviously underneath that umbrella, focusing more on the internal. So while we're going to discuss all things external, let's focus just on the words involved in the internal for right now. Okay, Qigong. Qigong, in essence, is just meaning the movement of energy. Any concern or involvement with the movement of energy is Qigong. All right. Now, what people are often asking when they're asking that question, I want to learn Qigong, is they're actually saying, I want to learn the Daoyin exercises that predate Tai Chi. Now, those were Taoist exercises that hailed from shamanic dance tradition and were used for a variety of energetic purposes. But it's enough to know that eventually those techniques and things, right, were adapted into different families of Tai Chi Chuan. Okay, that's the martial movement, martial internal practice of developing and cultivating, harnessing, storing, and utilizing energy. Now, beyond that, last video we talked about trajectory of this channel, things that I want to do, my history, and we're not going to linger on that. Let's get right into stuff. Let's stay in the now, and the now is Jiuguan. Now what you've been waiting for, Jiuguan. Movements 4, 5, and 6, before we get into some notes on meditation, moving meditation, philosophy, and the constituents of Tai Chi. These next 3 movements can and should be done after the preceding movements we learned last time. That said, for this video, focus on learning the ins and outs of these next 3 movements first. All right, folks, the good stuff. All right, talking about the yin-yang. What is it? Why do we care? Should we care? Where does it come from? When did it come from? Let's start there, okay? Where did it come from? No one really knows. The fact is that it was a, pan-Chinese concept that was around and thought about for a really long time. And then the symbol popped up in far more recent history than the origins would suggest to us. Actually, a word on symbology real quick. It should be said that most of our contemporary or modern symbols are representational of concepts, traditions, or otherwise that really predate that visual, And so when we're talking about the yin-yang, what we're talking about is something that first recorded presentation of was somewhere around Neo-Confucianism. But that said, we do have to keep in mind that there were Taoists thinking on the motion of energy being constant and represented in dualism for a very, very long time before that symbol popped up. All right, so the symbol itself is only representational of something that had been around for a long time. Now, as I understand it, eventually it comes to pass that the yin-yang and the 5 elements become acceptable or official Taoist cosmology. So in my opinion, it's quite acceptable then to say that it is a Taoist symbol in origin. However, it's associative with Tai Chi, or the grand ultimate in Tai Chi Chuan as well. So you could see how if you start getting too into the historicity of it, you could begin to split hairs over what is arguably the least important element of this discussion as it pertains to what we're doing, right? So, respect that history because it's cool. We want to know about it. But let's get into the philosophical end of this, because I think that might be a little more applicable to our aim. If our business was energy, and sensing energy was where we were trying to go with this business, then the yin-yang could most accurately be described as a lens to see through without the eyes with which to perceive the evident and constant flow of energy and motion. All right? Now, after saying that, it should be obvious that this is where I have to depart from Google's insistence that this is a symbol depicting oppositional polarities or opposing forces. That becomes a little misleading, and I'm going to get into why. But, talking like that, you're eventually going to bump into, hey, doesn't this fly in the face of oneness? And I'd have to say, well, yeah, it kind of does when you're thinking of it that way, right? Okay? So, oppositional forces, not what I believe this symbol is about. And of course, everyone's entitled to disagree with me. However, best example I can give as to how I perceive this, all right? Let's think about handshake, all right? 2 hands come together, they shake. Now, you got 1 hand, 2 hand, right? They come together in cooperation in a very agreeable way to create this one thing, the handshake, right? Nobody thinks of a handshake as 2 separate things, right? It's handshake singular, it's one thing. And it is the cooperation in an agreeable way we're focusing on here, okay? And we're going to extrapolate that to how that works in terms of martial arts. But to continue, imagine now instead we've got one flimsy hand and we've got one real dominant, mean hand, and that mean hand is just manhandling the little fingers of that flimsy hand. Does it look like a handshake? Or instead do we perceive 2 separate things, right? In this, oppositional way. Okay? So there you go, right? The hand manhandling the little hand there, that's kind of the perception or the means of looking at this symbol as representational of these oppositional forces, which is misleading. It doesn't really convey the handshake, versus the 2 hands in cooperation in this agreeable way, right? And that, my friends, that's where we're trying to go with our comprehension of the yin-yang. I must reiterate the takeaway here because it's really important to take away. And that is the bottom line, the lens that we are peering through, the yin-yang, what we're trying to get to, all right, is a comprehension of the 2 agreeable, cooperative forces that comprise everything. You, me, anything we can look at, we can perceive through this lens, all right? And that's because everything is comprised of energy. End of story. So if we could start accepting that, and we could start grasping that, we could start seeing that, in ever expansive ways, Now it becomes easier and easier to translate that to the offensive and defensive movements that we're learning in our martial practices like Tai Chi Chuan. Make no mistake about it, every single movement that you see in Jiuguan or any of the stuff I show you in these videos has offensive and defensive application. Now that's advanced stuff, so we're getting ahead of ourselves. This video, again, we're going to stay focused. Well, we're going to try to stay focused in every video, but I'm not going to lie, I'm not the best at that. That said, right now, we're going to focus on meditation. Okay, one moment. Before we move on to meditation, I really want to engage you guys in this, right? The Karate Do masters, they used to have different methodology to teach their students principles, things of that nature. And they would do it by way of riddles, right? They would ask them questions that were extremely difficult to answer that may or may not have even have been relevant to what they were doing, because sometimes it was really just about kind of browbeating them, telling them their answers didn't cut the cheese, so to speak. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that type of, I guess we call that negative reinforcement. Yeah, some traditions I'm not going to pretend like I think are cool. But I do agree that the riddle work, right, asking questions engages the mind in a way that, is, more engaging than just watching me. So at that, I'm going to ask a question here that I would like you guys to answer down in the comments. And I will give my answer to the question in the next video. Now, there are no right or wrong answers to this, of course. So go wild, think on it, do whatever you want to do with it. But the question is, okay, what are the benefits of understanding duality as we've discussed here? Now, some of those I've just made, really evident, and we've discussed in these explanations. Others, though, might be able to be surmised a little more succinctly than we've gone into in this video. So I look forward to hearing your answers, reading your answers, and talking about this next video. Okay. Meditation. We have arrived at a great note to explore, and explore we shall. What is meditation, and why or how is it relevant to Qigong and Tai Chi and the internal arts that we're studying? Okay. To answer the first query, I think it's important to note that there are a plethora of different types of meditation, right? Breathwork, mindfulness, guided meditation, so on and so forth, transcendental meditation. You could just keep going. The type of meditation we're concerned with, though, is, maybe not surprisingly, moving meditation. However, okay, all of these types of meditation don't really help us answer the question at all, do they? Yet, if we look at all of these different types of meditation, do we not see some congruity? Can we not examine the overlap there to begin to understand it better? I certainly think so. From my vantage point, and I could be wrong, the way I see a similarity in all of those different types of meditation is essentially that they are all exhibitions of awareness or applications of our individuated consciousness in effort thereof. Working definition, it doesn't have to be yours. However, we could agree insofar as that, then I believe we could move on with the discussion to address seeing Qigong and meditation through that lens we were just talking about. And that, I believe, was why that conversation had to come first. Qigong, then, viewed through the lens we just articulated a comprehension of, can be looked at or broken down into two schools of cooperative thought when it comes to meditative Qigong, or meditation that is interested or concerned with the movement of energy. And that is generally believed or agreed upon to be meditation in stillness and meditation in movement, moving meditation. Okay, so moving on from there, if we are further concerned with developing the sensory perceptual reality of experiencing energy, right, that experiential experience that you're attempting to foster by gaining sensitivity to energy and expanding your comprehension thereof, then certainly we have to focus, in my opinion, most conducively on moving meditation. Why? Because if we're engaging in moving meditation, we are actively utilizing the body as an instrument that is taking part in that locomotion of energy. Finally, as an aside, let us address stillness and perhaps how that works cooperatively with movement, just for a moment, because we will explore this and talk about these types of things a lot more. But shall we say that we are looking at perhaps the shades of gray when it comes to stillness? And on that note, let's just be upfront about it. With Tai Chi, what we're learning to do is be more still while we're moving. Okay? I'll leave that at that because it is in depth. But suffice it to say, we have just gone over two very important requisite notes to moving toward the goal of sensing energy. Comrades, I could not be more proud of you if you are here for me to tell you you made it to the last note of the video. Alright, let's put this all together, shall we? You have A, 2/3 of the Jiuguan sequence with which to apply and practice the principles we've gone over. B, with a newfound awareness that all things consist of and persist by Qi, you now move deliberately as an instrument in tandem with that very ebb and flow. C, softly now, as your mind quiets, you're cognizant of your body gaining stillness in spite of your motion, hopefully requiring a little less physicality to execute your movements. D, and I would argue this is the most important. I would also hedge a bet that anyone watching the video up till this point has genuinely gained some ground in this particular vein, and that is gaining purview or perspective of the yellow brick road on the way to a sensory perceptual experience with vital energy. And now beyond that, we are going to talk about the last steps that need to be taken for you to go beyond the outset of your journey. In that vein, we cannot avoid talking about proficiency. Good Kung Fu equals proficiency, as mentioned. So, to those ends, let's examine the three constituents of your Tai Chi Chuan practice in Jiuguan, what you're focusing on making sure is performed in a functional way to provide for an unimpeded flow of energy. Word on when I say the flow of Qi or the flow of vital energy. I don't expect you to exactly know the entirety of what I mean by that. But what I'm saying is allow yourself the freedom to just suspend any confusion for a moment, because you're still at a foundational level right now. We're going beyond that. We're just about to ascend the stairs, let's say. Okay, in the third video, the topic is going to be understanding the flow of energy. So I'm not going to speak on that anymore right now. Let's get back to the three constituents I mentioned. A good and encompassing way to assess your Tai Chi practice, especially in respect to the goals which we've put forth here, is by looking at it in terms of three different elements that are working together here, okay? We have a triangle, some new symbolism. I'm not going to slay you with any more symbolism. We could talk about triangles some other time. But those three elements are the body, which we're going to talk about first, all right? The breath, which we've kind of talked about already a bit, but we're naturally going to get into that more as we get into the mind, which is going to primarily be in the next video, again, as we're discussing the flow of energy and just exactly what you're doing with your awareness that is now accepting this new reality. All right, folks, home stretch, and we need to talk about how to assess our Tai Chi Chuan practice to make sure the flow of vital energy is unimpeded. So, beginning with the body. Assessing the physicality that we are employing in our Tai Chi Chuan practice and whether or not that's actually conducive to what we're trying to do. Let's talk on that. Okay, first thing I look at generally is straight up and down spine posture, okay? That is extremely important for the unimpeded flow of vital energy. There's a number of reasons for that. Namely, it's because that straight up and down path from crown chakra to root chakra includes all of the chakra points. And that is like the super highway of energy through the body. If you don't know what chakras are yet, don't worry, you will. But that being said, you could imagine this in practice as a pole, if you will, that runs through the top of the head, down the path of the spine, right up between the legs or pelvis where the root chakra is, okay? Just imagine that pole keeping you straight, just like that pole sits, okay? That's a good way to at least kind of like self-check yourself, right? Say, how's my posture? And right here, I'm going to tell on myself, or rather, point something out to you guys, and that is that I have terrible curvature of the spine. So you're watching me do these things, and you're saying, man, that guy's got bad posture. Even when I'm talking, right? My head's kind of forward. Don't do as I do, do as I say. My bad posture or the curvature of my spine is the result of tattooing for 20 years and playing a real lot of guitar. Make sure that you check yourself, you check your posture, you make sure that those chakras are in line. And even if you do have curvature of the spine, give it a shot. Try to straighten it out, you know? It doesn't hurt. Well, it could hurt. Now, the other part of the physicality that I think, you know, can't be avoided being talked about, even if it's not something that I necessarily want you to get wrapped up in right now. And that is that, again, all of these movements have real application, okay? So, again, I mentioned earlier how that's advanced stuff. It's enough right now to just be aware of it. You know, the breathing, all of these other elements, they all work to one congruent end, which is application. That's, you know, usually the first stuff we get into if we're talking about the external arts. But since we're talking about the internal, let's keep everything relative, again, to the flow of energy and get to that breathing. Now, we talked about Dantian breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, going into the lower belly, tongue lightly touching the roof of the mouth, you know, coordinated with each of the different exercises in Jiuguan in a different way as to suggest a relative or respective inhale and exhale, 2 parts, exemplary of some of the symbology we talked about. But beyond that, okay, we have said that Qi is inherent all things. So when we think about our breathing, we want our breathing to sort of be a bridge to that philosophy. Let it too be a division of all things in tandem, right? Everything has this duality working in tandem like we discussed in the symbology. Don't just think of it as your breathing's in sync with your arm or your leg. You know, it's in sync with everything. To leave nothing to question, that is to say, that every facet of the practice can be perceived as being of either side of that harmony we understand as the yin-yang, traversing our divisively whole blueprint fluidly, equally, to the ends of harmony and congruity of breath. Which brings us finally to the third constituent, the mind. The mind, the third constituent, is going to be talked about a lot more in the next video, or I should say, the role of the mind and what it is knowing, okay? And I'm going to say knowing the path of travel. Why do I say it like that? Well, I say it like that to alleviate any anxiety, okay, about trying to imagine this. You don't need to have this wonderfully vivid imagination to be able to do this stuff. This stuff is the way it is. Well, let me give you an example. Do you need to imagine your blood pumping to know that your blood's pumping? Do you have a sense that your blood is pumping even when you're not imagining it? Do you have a knowing that your heart is both sending out and receiving blood? Is all of that something that we could agree with, whether or not our mind's able to imagine it? Surely. Also, quickly, blood and Qi have a special relationship. We'll talk about that next video because that's got something to do with that flow as well. See, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's where we all want to get to, right? The flow of energy. But yeah, you know, if anyone out there is doubting right now, still, after all of this and what you've accomplished here, which again, please be proud of yourself because I am. But if you're doubting whether or not you could feel energy, okay? Because that's like... if there is a number one thing that hangs people up in this stuff, you know, it's this inhibiting skepticism, Well, am I even going to feel anything? Is it real? Is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, I don't want to convince you with some kind of like crazy story here. Think about this, okay? I want you to just go back in time. Have you been to a concert? I want you to go back in time to your favorite concert. Was it just like listening to the album at home? Same thing? No different? Or did you feel some type of charge there? Did you notice that the people felt some type of charge there? Do people seem to act differently at concerts? Do they jump around and kick each other in the face and feel good about it? Yeah, they do. As sure as you have felt that differential, at a concert, you can and will feel energy by doing these practices. It's no different. It's no different. Am I suggesting you could walk around feeling like you're at a concert? Yeah, actually, that is exactly what I'm suggesting. When you begin to work within these principles, you can absolutely feel that way. I'm not pulling a punch here. So that's just one of the many real interesting things that we're gonna bump into here as we move along this beautiful process with one another. And again, guys, I thank you so much for your patience. I thank you for making it through this video. Stay tuned for a couple more notes. Channel stuff, I guess, right? Channel stuff. That's neat to say, channel stuff.